And then there were 9. The Republican presidential field continues to grow as Senator Lindsey Graham recently announced he's running. With so many candidates and so much at stake, the question becomes, will they adhere to Ronald Reagan's 11th Commandment? Thou shalt not speak ill of a fellow Republican. Perfect time to bring in our friend Craig Shirley, the president of Shirley and Bannister Public Affairs, a noted author. His latest book, Last Act, The Final Years and Emerging Legacy of Ronald Reagan, due to be released in October. Craig, thanks for spending some time with us tonight on Newsmax Prime.
You bet, JD.
Now let's go back, because Ronald Reagan, as the senior statesman of his party at the end of 2 terms, embraced the so-called 11th Commandment. Explain the difference between Ronald Reagan 1988 and Ronald Reagan 1976 when he challenged Gerald Ford.
That is an excellent question. You know, when Reagan first coined the 11th Commandment, when he was running for governor in 1966, the party had just gone through a bloodbath. Of 64 between Goldwater and Rockefeller, and really just in California, really just had torn itself apart. And Reagan adopted it from the GOP state chairman as a means of kind of bringing the party back together. And what he meant by the 11th Commandment was that you could criticize a fellow Republican over policy. What you couldn't criticize a fellow Republican over was sobriety or patriotism or fidelity. So when he went after Gerald Ford in 1976, he went after him on the issues. He went after him on détente and the Panama Canal and various other issues. But he didn't go after him on personal issues. So in his mind, he did not break the 11th Commandment.
Well, now we take a look at a field that is burgeoning, that continues to grow seemingly exponentially.
Yes.
And candidates want to differentiate themselves, and we're already hearing talk, and I don't know if this is Operation Research and Whispers, but we're hearing that the Jeb Bush team may become more assertive and start to criticize fellow Republicans. How do you interpret this past weekend's revelations about that?
Yeah, well, you know, there's so many Republican candidates now. It's like a fraternity rush party. Everybody's in there. I think that when you have so many bodies moving, you have so many consultants moving, it's like atoms. The more you have atoms bunched together, the more friction you get, the more heat you get. I think it's inevitable that given the amount of candidates, the amount of money, the amount of consultants, and quite frankly, some bad consultants, who appeal to the worst common denominator, will engage in personal attacks. But again, this is a character test for the candidates. Do they rise above their own consultants and make an appeal to the majority of Republican primary voters and hopefully the majority of American voters, or do they engage in kind of baseless or personal attacks, things like that? So that itself is interesting because because it is a character test, and the founding fathers, the framers of the Constitution, said the only 2 considerations for President of the United States were character and experience. So in and of itself, this is going to be a test.
Well, as we take a look at that test and the number of people willing to step up and take it, does the sheer size of the field handicap the Republican Party? Because I've always been of the mind, hey, the more the merrier, and it's good to have people who are ambitious and talented coming up and trying to get involved in this.
I couldn't agree more. I think that competition has always brought out the best in people. It's been proven in the marketplace of politics and marketplace of ideas and in the consumer marketplace for hundreds, if not thousands of years. Dick Cheney, who I interviewed several times for my books, told me that Reagan's challenge of Gerald Ford made Ford a better candidate, and that he although he did go on to lose to Jimmy Carter in 1976, he lost by the barest of margins. He lost by less than 2 percentage points in the popular vote and a very few electoral vote. But that Ford was a much better candidate and a much better campaigner, having been severely tested by Ronald Reagan, and it might not have been as close as it was. So there you have the evidence right there from Gerald Ford's own chief of staff, President Ford's chief of staff, that the competition brought out the best in him.
About 40 seconds, the fear has been that all the conservatives dilute a conservative base and an establishment pick waltzes in. Is that a legitimate fear for 2016 for the Republicans?
I think so. Is that, as we both know, is that the party has operated in more or less a sense of equilibrium since the time of Eisenhower, half establishment, half kind of revolutionary Reaganite. So it'd be the Bush wing on one side and the Reagan wing on the other. But I think we both agree that the Reagan wing now outweighs the Bush wing, although you have many more conservatives competing. So it is possible for Jeb Bush or somebody else to get, say, 30% of the primary vote and still get a first ballot nomination. I tend to think, though, that it'll winnow out fairly quickly, and it'll come down to an establishment candidate versus a non-establishment candidate. And I think this time that, given the voters' reaction to all the things about Washington, they're going to opt for the non-establishment candidate.
We will leave it there. Craig, Shirley, you have our thanks for your time, and we're coming right back.